Welcome everybody back to the Crib YouTube channel. And if you're listening on podcast platform, this is the Nuggets of Gold podcast. So for To the Crib, we do a lot of overall NFL stuff and also the Nuggets of Gold podcast within that, which is for 49ers oriented topics. And we're going to be doing our Nuggets of Gold podcast on this channel and over the podcast bi-weekly from now on. So either Sunday or Monday, an episode will be out. And then either Wednesday or Thursday, the other episode will be out. So for today's episode, we're going to be talking about Jimmy G, and then we're going to be talking about Trey Lance. So basically, first episode of the offseason, first Sunday actually recording this with no football, we're going to be focusing solely on the 49ers quarterback position. So we'll lead this one off with Jimmy G just because there's a bunch of spots that he could potentially get moved to. I think it's become very clear to everyone that he is going to be moved. He will not be a 49er during the 2022 season, and it seems like he is going to get moved very early in the offseason. I did kind of wonder about that coming into this this offseason this year, that would he get moved right away, or would they do something later, like maybe at the draft or maybe even in a training camp waiting for another team's quarterback to get hurt. It sounds like they're going to move him at the start of the league year, which I think is March 17th, I want to say. So a couple weeks away. Rumors are starting to pick up, and I have 4 teams on my list that I think are very likely for him to land. Those teams are going to be the Colts, the Bucks, the Steelers, and the Commanders. And I think there's also some other teams that you can throw in the mix, like the Panthers or the Broncos. But before anything kind of gets rumored to them, I don't really think it's worth talking about, just because they already, I don't know, I don't think that they're that likely. But let's start out with the Colts. I think that they're a very, very interesting spot. It seems that they did kind of reach out to the 49ers last offseason when it was clear that they were going to make the move for Trey Lance, or they were going to make a move for quarterback when they traded up to 3. And the Colts reached out apparently, and they wanted Jimmy Garoppolo. They wanted him. They said, hey, we want to make a move for him. They end up going and getting Carson Wentz. Apparently, I didn't think Wentz was that bad. He put up 27 touchdowns, 7 picks. It was definitely underwhelming that they didn't make the playoffs, and losing to the Jags on your season finale to not get in is rough. So it seems like they're apparently wanting to move on from Carson Wentz, and Jimmy G is one of those names. Now, I will be the first, and yes, I'm a 49er fan. I'm not very high on Jimmy Garoppolo. But coming from the Colts perspective, I don't even think this is a lateral move. I think you're actually losing a little bit, and I think that Carson Wentz will get you less in the trade market than it will cost to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo. So I find this one very, very odd if coming from the Colts perspective on this. But Aiden, what do you think about a potential Colts Jimmy Garoppolo trade?
Colts is definitely interesting because Wentz was solid for the majority of the year, and they had Jonathan Taylor go absolutely crazy, and they still weren't able to make the playoffs after they lost to the Jags. And Wentz had the worst game of maybe his career, played awful and cost them a playoff spot against the team with the number 1 pick. I think it's really interesting if he gets moved to the Colts, particularly because he played so bad against them this year. But I think he would have a decent amount of success there. I think he is a bit of an upgrade, given that you know what you're gonna get. Like Jimmy is not, he's never gonna be that A guy. He's gonna be somewhere from a B plus to a B minus. He's a solid B quarterback, and Wentz can be an A, but he can also be a D. So I think the Colts and a lot of those other teams that you mentioned are in positions where they have decent defenses, they have good running games, where they only need a B guy to make the playoffs, similar to what the Niners have been over the past couple years. We only needed Jimmy to not lose games, and he still managed to lose a couple, but he also won a couple. I think it ended up being relatively the same. Would be a really interesting move. I'm not a big believer in the Titans moving forward, so that would definitely set the Colts up to at least be the second best team in that division, because Watson's probably going to get moved. Jaguars are a dumpster fire, and the Titans, I don't really know what's going on there. So I think the Colts with Jimmy probably could win the division next year. And I think it makes sense for them. But like you said, I don't think that they're going to give up like a first round pick to do it. So interesting. I don't think that they're the number 1 landing spot, but it's one that you wouldn't really consider first looking at the quarterback needy teams. But definitely interesting to think about.
Do you think that, or would you, if you're the Colts, would you rather have Jimmy Garoppolo or Carson Wentz?
I'd probably rather have Jimmy. His contract's better even. Like he's on a very manageable deal, and you like I mentioned earlier, you know what you're gonna get. It's not gonna be awesome, but you're gonna get solid B play, and I think for the Colts, that's good enough to win that division. It's not particularly competitive.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think contract wise, it's a huge reason why Carson Wentz is not a very desired quarterback right now because he makes so much money. And Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, I think he's like a $24 million cap hit next year, I want to say. But when you look at that, you also have to kind of add in like there's it's very likely that he gets a 1 year extension on that and his cap hit gets reduced significantly. So a lot of people have kind of talked about that as a potential, like almost like a trade and sign afterwards. Um, but I do think I would just player wise, I would rather have Carson Wentz. But when you add in, okay, like it could be like $15-20 million difference in contract, you would rock with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think that makes sense. I do find it interesting because Carson Wentz threw 7 picks last year, and in 2020 he had a bad year. He was pretty horrible in 2020 on the Eagles. But the 3 years before that, and some of them were years where he was banged up, but he threw 7 each of those years. So he's had 4 of his 6 years in the league. He's thrown exactly 7 interceptions. Jimmy Garoppolo, if the Colts do acquire him, he's going to throw a lot more picks on that team. And I don't think people really bring that up because people bring up like Wentz can be super up and down. And that is absolutely true. Carson Wentz will look great one day. He'll make a ton of plays. He'll be a playmaker. He'll look a little bit like that MVP year. And then other games he'll come out and it feels like he can't even complete little throws to the running back on swing routes. So he's a very, very inconsistent player. Now with Jimmy Garoppolo, you're getting a guy that's extremely inconsistent when it comes from play to play rather than necessarily game to game. Jimmy Garoppolo will be playing pretty good, and all of a sudden he'll throw like 3 straight interceptable passes. And you're like, dude, what happened? Like, what is going on? And so I think that's the thing where you talk about like, yeah, Wentz is inconsistent, but Jimmy's inconsistent too. And I think a lot of Colts fans expect like, oh, the Niners have had these long playoff runs. Jimmy's the kind of guy, like if you give him a good run game, he'll go real far. Well, the Niners' problem has been in these playoff runs is that Jimmy Garoppolo has been bad. Like Jimmy Garoppolo has been really, really bad in 2019 and 2021 in the playoffs. Now, he has had some great games in the regular season where he's been really clutch, huge come from behind victories. That has happened, but in the playoffs, he's definitely struggled a lot. So
I wouldn't say he was bad in like 2019. He just really didn't have to do anything during that Vikings
yeah,
game. He was good during the Packers game. He had the long pass to Kittle that blew it open in 2019. And Super Bowl, like, played pretty decent for the majority of the game. I think he is who he is. He's not perfect, but play to play, it's kind of like I'm gonna use the analogy of like poker. Like Jimmy's gonna go all in on a crappy hand, and he's going to lose the hand, but he's gonna win enough small hands that at the end of the day, you're probably gonna be net positive.
I
And
like that.
it's one of those things where Wentz, I think, will have days where he lost you $150, but Jimmy is consistently $5 up here, $5 down here. Um, to kind of use a bit of an interesting analogy there. Um, I think Jimmy is who he is, and Wentz could be awesome, but could not be. And I totally get the play to play thing, but like Jimmy has the shortest memory of any quarterback that I've ever seen. I would love to see the percentage of touchdown drives after he throws a pick because it's probably relatively high. It's probably higher than the average. Because I'm always impressed after he throws a pick, he's able to rally. And the Niners have been in position to win pretty much every game that he started for them, which is pretty impressive.
That's absolutely true. That's a good point. He's putting money after he throws a pick, honestly, and it's usually after like a terrible pick. We're like, dude, what are you doing? And then it's like just a perfect drive right after that. No, that's definitely true. One other thing I was thinking about was for Jimmy Garoppolo too. If you're looking at him compared to Wentz, I do think Jimmy Garoppolo is a significantly better leader. I mean, people have not liked Carson Wentz in the past, and you hear 49ers players, you hear Trey Lance talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, and everyone is very, very fond of Jimmy Garoppolo as the person. So I do think it would be an interesting move for the Colts. It definitely could end up working out for them, but I just feel like it's kind of a lateral move, and you're probably going to give up a little bit more. So I don't know how much I love it for them. Um, Now, actually, Carson Wentz, the team that he is kind of expected to go to at this point, and it's very early. So obviously, these rumors are kind of all over the place, is the Steelers. Now, I think that Jimmy Garoppolo the best spot that he could end up, or the best spot for the team would be the Steelers. I think if the Steelers add Jimmy Garoppolo, I think he's going to have the most success there. I think that's the most likely team to make the playoffs if they add him. This is a team that has really, really struggled at the quarterback position. Ben Roethlisberger has been terrible the past 2 years. His arm was completely shot. This is a really talented team in Pittsburgh. And if they go and get Jimmy Garoppolo, which I will say I think would cost the 20 overall pick, I think that's the one they have. I think it's 20 or 22. That's a lot. But that's probably what it would cost because so many other teams will offer a high second round pick that the Niners will accept that second round pick. And the only way the Steelers are going to be able to outbid is if they offer that first, I think, which sounds like a ton to get Jimmy Garoppolo. I agree with that. But I do think that the Steelers would be able to make a run. And I think they would. I mean, I guess they have been a playoff team the last couple of years, but I think they'd be significantly better with Jimmy Garoppolo at the helm. I think that this is an offense. Yes, they need to improve the O-line a lot. If they can improve the O-line somewhat, and you have Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and you have Najee Harris out of the backfield, and maybe you bring back Juju, like that's a pretty good arsenal. And Jimmy Garoppolo under center with a terrific Steelers defense. They could be a really, really good threatening team in the AFC. I don't know if it'll get it done for them, but I do think that it makes their chances to make the playoffs significantly higher if they add him. So what do you think about Jimmy Garoppolo? And do you think that's way too much, pick 20 to acquire him?
No, I think it's more likely that they give up a second and a fourth than they give up the first, and I could even see them bringing in Jimmy and still drafting a guy like they really liked Willis coming out of the Senior Bowl. I could see him falling to 20, and they're like, we'll take him and we'll start Jimmy for 2 years, similar to what the Niners just did. Um, I think it's a really interesting spot for him because they're built similar to how the 49ers are built. I think he would have an opportunity to be in a very similar role. Um, Weapons fit what he wants to do. Also, they don't necessarily love like they're not guys who need to have the ball pushed down the field. Guys that can work over the middle, throw the famous Jimmy Garoppolo slant. Um, I think it'd be an interesting spot for him, but I don't know if he puts them over the edge. Like this season, the Steelers had no business making the playoffs. The Ravens, if Lamar doesn't go down, they win one of their last like 4 games, and they make it. I think they were the 1 seed when Lamar went down, which is wild to think about with all the other injuries that they had. I think the Browns will be better going forward. I firmly think the Steelers are potentially last in that division. It's them or the Browns probably, considering the Bengals just made the Super Bowl. So it'll be really interesting for them going forward. I could see them almost punting for 2 years and saying we're gonna find a quarterback that we love, and Jimmy could be the bridge guy. I don't think that he moves the needle for them to go from this fringe playoff contender to a true Super Bowl contender, which and Pittsburgh's been so well run over the past few years, past decade and a half, really, that I don't think they really care about just making the playoffs. This is a team who wants to who wants to win Super Bowls, and Jimmy could be a decent stopgap, or they could look at Jimmy and be like, it's not worth giving up someone that we're not going to get much better by. Might just be worth starting Mason Rudolph and picking somebody high next year. So it really boils down to, I guess, how Tomlin feels. I think he has pretty much authority over these next couple years, and if he wants to win now or if he wants to win later. And there's an argument to be made for Jimmy in both of those spots, but I think it's an interesting spot, but it doesn't really move the needle for him.
Yeah. One other thing that's kind of odd about their situation is their GM, Kevin Colbert. This is his last year. Like he's done after the draft, or not his last year. It's his last offseason. So it would be pretty weird if they went and did get Malik Willis at 20 and then traded it like a 2 and a 4, like you said, for Jimmy Garoppolo. But I actually kind of like that. Looking at the quarterback class, I don't know if I was a GM. I don't know if I would draft a quarterback this year. I'm not very high on any of the guys. But I do think Malik Willis has tremendous upside. But still, like, and also like any Steeler fans listening that are like, you have to be crazy to think we're going to give up pick 20. I wouldn't give up pick 20. I will tell you that right now. I do not think it would be a good move, but I do think that the market for Jimmy Garoppolo is a little bit higher than people are anticipating. And I think that he could end up netting a first most likely he will net a 2. There's been rumors that he would get pick 11. That's crazy, I think. And we'll talk about the Commanders in a little bit here. But for the Steelers, like you said, I think it makes more sense to go like make the big swing for a Russell Wilson, an Aaron Rodgers. And apparently they do want Carson Wentz, but I wouldn't want Carson Wentz if I were them. And I think like it does make sense. But for Jimmy Garoppolo, I think this is the best spot for him to go there and then immediately win. So that's kind of where I'm at there. Any Steelers fans listening, let us know what you think about that, because I really wonder like what the gauge is. A couple people I reached out to, I said, hey, would you want to trade a pick 20 for Jimmy Garoppolo? And they're like, absolutely not. No way we're going to do that. So I do think that would be the price, though. And I think it's a lot, but I think ultimately the Steelers, like you said, I think it makes more sense for them to run it back with Mason Rudolph, or to do maybe a 2 quarterback move, which actually something that at the time the Redskins did when they got Kirk and RG3, and then kind of like safe option and then almost like risky option. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but I do kind of wonder how that plays out. The next team I have for Jimmy Garoppolo, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, obviously just lost Tom Brady. So, of course, the Jimmy Garoppolo rumors have to come in. Now, I will say I don't think this is really that likely, but Aiden, do you think there's a pretty good chance he ends up if he ends up in Tampa Bay?
I think the only way that it happens is if Brady, behind the scenes, because I don't think that he's going to do this publicly, says I'm going to play for the Niners next year. I think that that's the only way that it happens, and then the Buccaneers are forced because they have his rights for next year. I think the only way that it happens is Brady is like, I want to be a Niner, please trade me, and the Niners would give up Garoppolo, and they'd get back Brady's rights and maybe like a fifth or a sixth. And I don't even know if they would want to do that over, definitely not over like a pick 20, but over like a second round pick. You have a major decision there between bringing in Brady for a year, having Lance sit another year of that rookie contract. There's major question marks there. I think it's pretty low. I think it's the lowest out of this four that we're going to talk about. Um, just because the styles don't really fit. Jimmy's a guy who's not going to push the ball down the field, and Bruce Arians loves to push the ball down the field. So it'll be interesting if it happens, but I think the only way that it realistically happens is if Brady pushes things from behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty solid. I also don't get the fit there. Like, I saw a tweet that said, "Hey, if Jimmy Garoppolo ends up in Tampa Bay, he's going to throw 35 interceptions." Not only is there that aspect of it because Bruce Arians does really like to force the ball downfield, but what I just said, he likes to force the ball downfield. That is not Jimmy Garoppolo's game, and at least that has not been his game in San Francisco. And I don't expect that to change based on his physical tools. So I don't really see that happening. For Tampa Bay, I think if you went from Jimmy Garoppolo or from Tom Brady to Jimmy Garoppolo, that'd be extremely underwhelming. I also think it's funny because I think your trade is right. I think that's what it would be. But imagine what the media would say if Jimmy Garoppolo has just been traded for Tom Brady. Because, of course, the thing with that is Tom Brady holds all the cards. If he's like, I want to go play for the Niners, they're not going to say, oh, no, we're not going to trade you, Tom. Like, they're going to do it. And so they'd probably like toss in a pick with it. But it would look so, just on paper, you see Tom Brady for Jimmy Garoppolo. Tom Brady's coming for 1 year. Jimmy Garoppolo's on a 1 year deal. It would look awful. I think any Bucks fans are like, that will not happen. But it is like they don't really decide because like it's Brady, it's Tom Brady. He's gonna tell you if he wants to go somewhere, and you're just gonna say, oh yeah, we'll let you go there. So I do think that's probably the most likely way that it happens. But I hate the system for the Bruce Arians system for Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it'd be a disaster, honestly. And I think that the Bucks could go a number of different ways. I don't know if I would rather have Matt Corral start next year for the Bucks than I would Jimmy Garoppolo, and I don't even think that's like your best spot. I think that you'd probably rather go get a vet and try to be pretty solid next year. I'm very interested to see what the Bucks do this offseason, though, because I think there could be a number of different ways. But any Bucks fans listening, let us know what you think about that. Final team, the Washington Commanders. I think this one is probably the most likely spot that he ends up. It's not my favorite for him. If I could rank these for Jimmy Garoppolo's sake, I would probably go Steelers, Colts, Bucks, Bucks last. I would go. No, I'll go with Bucks third. Bucks have better offensive weapons. But I think if the Washington Commanders, they've said that they really want to make a big move at quarterback. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a big move at quarterback per se, but I think that once you start looking around the market, it's like, okay, there's not many people here. They definitely want a veteran guy. They do not want to draft someone. I think that's been very clear. Ron Rivera is a lot older than most coaches. They want to have a playoff season. They have had one of the least successful last 25, 30 years of any team. They have been really, really bad for a long time. They want to make the playoffs. That's their goal, to make the playoffs. And if they feel that Jimmy Garoppolo can do that, they are likely to overpay to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. So, what do you think about the Commanders?
I agree with you. I think it's probably the most likely scenario. I don't think he goes for pick 11. I think it's probably their second round pick, and maybe you get a fourth or a sixth or something like that, something as a bit of a filler. But I think it's an interesting spot for him. You mentioned the Bucks weapons. I don't particularly think that the Bucks weapons are anything to write home about anymore. Godwin's a free agent. Antonio Brown is off the walls. Um, Fournette could force his way out after Brady's gone, and the Commanders have uh, Terry McLaurin, Gibson, solid. I think that they're pretty on par, um, and it could be interesting for Jimmy, given that it, I just don't know because I don't think the Niners want to send him to the NFC. I think that they would rather push him to the AFC, which makes me think the Steelers, Colts are more likely to happen. But the fit is so seamless with the Commanders. I think that I totally agree that they want to win now. They realize that they have a pretty short window to be competitive. The Cowboys are every year going to be a question mark, and other than that, like I don't think the Eagles are set on Hurts. I don't think that they're going to be awesome next year, and they just snuck into the playoffs this year. Giants are a major question mark. I think that the Commanders look around that division and say we could win it next year. Defense underwhelmed last year, and we were still okay. I think it's an interesting spot for them, and honestly, I think out of the most success right away that he would see, I think that they're probably second behind the Steelers. Um, Maybe tied with the Colts. It's a very interesting spot because they're not as good as the Cowboys are, but I think that they'd make the playoffs. It's an interesting spot. I'm not sure what value would be, but I have a feeling the Niners are gonna rather trade him to the AFC. But if Jimmy only wants to play for an NFC team, and a lot of I think this trade is going to depend on where Jimmy wants to go. That's not like they're not going to send him somewhere that he doesn't want to go. And if he doesn't want to go to Washington, where they've been dysfunctional to say the least, I think their facility got raided by the FBI again a couple months ago. Major question marks over there. I could see him being like, please do not trade me there. And it's just a really interesting spot because this draft is so weak, but Jimmy holds cards, Brady holds cards. The Niners are in a really interesting spot. And I honestly could see them holding on to Jimmy next year and being like, we just have the best backup in the league. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. It obviously hurts the contract extension of Debo Bosa, but like I think that's probably not as likely as trading him, but definitely more likely than just releasing him.
Oh yeah, and I think that you could easily get a day two pick from him. I think there's going to be multiple offers from a day two pick. And I also told you in the past, like I didn't think that they were going to get that much, but it definitely
Mm,
sounds like. I mean, I'm even
Will they
floating
take a
one.
fifth round pick? Say the best you get is a fourth round pick. Do you take a fourth round pick or do you say okay we'll roll with Jimmy as the best backup? I think that's a real discussion that they got to have internally.
I think it's really unlikely that that's the best that they get because I don't think anyone that is trying to win. I think there's a handful of teams that are trying to win. I think Washington is one of them. I think that they're like we have to get a quarterback. Either a coach feels that he's going to get fired, or if they do draft a young quarterback, they're like this dude is not going to be ready. And maybe that's like a mid round pick you take or like second day two pick. I think that's why Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get moved for a lot more than I personally think he's worth. I also think that the playoff run helps a ton for that because you've had 2 playoff runs when he's been healthy in the 2 seasons that he's been healthy there. So they're like, all right, this guy's been winning a bunch. I don't know. I would be really. I was there earlier in the year that like maybe it would be a day 3 pick. I think it's a day 2 pick, and I think potentially they could get a 1 from him. And I don't think he's worth it. I really don't. But that's what I would
There's a
probably get.
worst case scenario where Rodgers goes to the Steelers, Packers just roll with Love. Teddy Bridgewater is a name that I think is in that Jimmy Garoppolo tier.
Yeah.
He takes the Bucks job or something like that. And the Commanders trade up and they fall in love with Kenny Pickett, and then you're stuck and you're like, who needs him anymore? The Colts are like, fine, we'll just roll with Wentz. It's too much of a lateral move. I don't think that there's enough quarterback. There is a scenario in which the quarterback needy teams are like, we're not going to overpay for this guy. If I was the Commanders GM, I'm not trading a first round pick for Jimmy. I'm probably not giving up a second round pick, to be completely honest.
So I think it'd be 42. That's the pick to have in the second. That's what I think would be the deal. I do not think that they would even consider pick 11. I know that was a
I wouldn't
rumor.
do it as Martin Mayhew, former Niner, knows Jimmy really, really well. I don't think that he's worth that. He doesn't make Washington a Super Bowl contender. They maybe make the playoffs as part of this crowded NFC East thing, but I don't know. It's a really interesting spot, and if he feels like his job is on the line, sure, take a swing. But I could also see them being like Kenny Pickett at the very least is going to be Jimmy. Why not just roll the dice a little bit?
Yeah, and I do ultimately think that is probably better long term for Washington as well. But I think that their defense is going to be a lot better. And I think that their actual goal for next year is we want to make the playoffs. And I think that is the number one goal that they have. Is not like, oh, we want to build for the future. I think it is we want to make the playoffs. And I think a lot of times that's not a spot where you really want your team to be in because it's like, all right, that's not that high of a ceiling. Like you want to win, like you, as a fan, you want to see your team win the Super Bowl. That's the only thing you really care about. But I think for them, it's like we've had such little success. If we get Jimmy Garoppolo in here, I think we can make it as a wild card. I think we can definitely make it as a wild card because NFC. One thing is the NFC is a lot more weak, especially
Yes,
if Brady is for
100%.
sure out, and if Rodgers if Rodgers either retires or goes to the Broncos because that's like feels like I think those two, and then the Packers are the top 3 options. All of a sudden, it's like kind of wide open. And for
Would
a wild
you?
card, yeah,
I was seeing stuff on Twitter. Chase Young is a really interesting name on that Washington team. If you're the Niners, do you give up Jimmy and a pick to get Chase Young right now, coming off an ACL tear?
100%. But I don't think they'd even.
One,
I don't even think they'd say. I think they'd hang up the phone immediately, even if you
I
offer it
think
too.
Washington looks at that D line and they're like, they were fine once Chase Young went out. Like it's not like they got substantially worse. If I'm Washington and I can get Jimmy and I don't know if I'd give up the second as the Niners, but Jimmy and a third, you know that you have those other 2 comp picks. If I'm the Niners, I think really hard about that, and that would make that Niners front 7 really really interesting, and something that I saw on Twitter that would be really terrifying for the rest of the NFC.
Also, Nick Bosa and Chase Young are good friends, like really, really good friends.
Absolutely.
I would love it. I'm completely down with that, but I don't think Washington has any interest in moving him. I also think like just what you hear about Ron Rivera, how you see Ron Rivera talk, I feel like he's probably decided like, no, Chase Young's my guy. He's my young building block. He's my superstar. And I think that's how they view him. And I think it's how they should view him too. I mean, he was number 1 pick. Like he's that kind of dude. And ACLs to me, I think if he had an Achilles tear, right, I think it'd be totally different because he might not be as explosive. I think most of the time, especially a first ACL, if you have one ACL in a knee, like you're probably going to be all right. You might not be quite there, but we just saw what Nick Bosa did, and this dude's a better athlete than Nick Bosa is. Not a better football player, but he's a better athlete than Nick Bosa is. So I don't think that they would even entertain that. And I think it would be like 2 Jimmy and something probably. I think it'd be a lot. I think it would be a huge amount to go trade for him.
There's been reports over the past couple days that they would include him in like a Russell Wilson trade, and obviously Jimmy isn't that caliber of guy, but like he would be a part of an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson trade, which makes me think that he's not completely untouchable. And the fact that his injury happened in kind of like didn't completely alter their season. They didn't become horrible after. I could see them being like, let's get something for him. Like we're gonna get a starter caliber quarterback and a second round pick, and like we're in the same spot to make the playoffs basically. Just an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. NFL, there's been crazier things that happen in the NFL. So we'll see. I think any Washington fans are like, if we trade Chase Young for Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm going to lose my mind. But no, yeah, I mean, I'm all for it as a Niners fan. So final thing to touch on today is Trey Lance a lock to be the 49ers starter next year? Now I've seen people debating, is he ready? Blah 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 blah. I think he's ready. I think I have a ton of confidence in Trey Lance moving forward. We've talked about it on the show time and time again. We are both big on Trey Lance. We think he's going to be great. But is he a 100% lock to be the starter next year? Aiden, what you thinking?
I'm not saying 100%. I think 90 to 95 is pretty fair. I think it's him or pretty much Brady. I don't really know who else the Niners like. I don't think Rodgers is really gonna happen. Given that you'd have to force a trade to make it happen, you'd have to give up a bunch of assets. Um, I don't think so. I maybe even more than 98% that Trey Lance is going to be the starter. And there were some really interesting reports that he would have been the starter coming out of camp or coming out of the preseason this past year if he didn't hurt his finger. So that pretty much banishes any if Jimmy were to somehow come back, Jimmy could start again. I don't think so. I think it's going to be Lance or Brady, and I give that a very low probability of happening.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. I think I wouldn't say it's a lock either, but I'd say the only other quarterback that could probably come in would be Tom Brady. So I'm fully expecting Trey Lance to be the starter next year. He's already been working with Brandon Ayuk, and I think it's LA. I know somewhere in Southern California. We've seen that he definitely looked a lot better in the Texans start. Now, granted, it's the Texans. I get it. But I think when you're looking at young quarterbacks, I think it's more about how does he process, how does the game settle down? And one thing that we talked about in the past was look at Trey Lance in the first half, look at him in the second half in all of those games, or maybe not first to second half, but look at him early and then look at him once after he settles down. In the Seahawks game when he came in the second half, he looked really rough at first. He was missing passes, a bunch of passes. And then after the first 2-3 drives, settles down, gets it going, starts playing a lot better. Look him in the Cardinals game. Looks kind of like shaky early on, throws an early pick. And then at the end of the game, he gets him in a spot where they almost end up winning that football game. Then we look at the Texans game. Really slow first half. Almost throws a pick right before the half ends. Second half, great in the second half. His numbers were fantastic. So he definitely progressed. Like in game, he looked a lot better as they went on. This is your future quarterback. It is almost a guarantee that they do rock with him next year. I think 95 to 98 is probably where I'd go to, Aiden. I think the only guy, though, I don't think Rodgers, there's a chance just because Rodgers is going to make way too much money. So there's one guy that can make it where Trey Lance is not going to be the starter next year, in my opinion. I believe in your opinion. So is there any chance that Tom Brady is a 49er next year?
There's definitely a chance, but it's one of those things where like I'm not even sure the Niners want him. Like the Niners didn't want him 2 years ago. There were some interesting reports that him and Shanahan don't really like each other. That Brady kind of poked fun at him about their 28-3 thing, and Shanahan didn't like it. Which I think Kyle is a very confident guy. I could see there is a scenario where Kyle would be like, "Screw you, I'm going to win without you." Um, I think that there's a chance that it happens because it is Tom Brady, but like so many things need to go right. And I'm not even sold that the Niners would be like, fine, we'll take Brady for a year because of this Lance deal. He's already wasted 1 year of that 5 year rookie contract. He only has four left. And the Niners' best chance to assemble a Super Bowl caliber favorite team is during that 4 year window. I would be surprised, but it's definitely possible. I mean, I'm never going to say never.
Yeah, I think it's extremely unlikely, but I also do think there's a sliver of a chance. Now, I think the 49ers would want him. I think that they've already clearly made the mistake. They went with Jimmy Garoppolo. They felt that Brady was washed. They were absolutely wrong on that. I thought it was kind of close. I would have probably been like, it's hard to like go at like to move on from your quarterback after you have a Super Bowl run. At the time, it wasn't close. It wasn't close at all. They should have gone with Tom Brady. That is very, very obvious now. Now, if Tom Brady was to come to the 49ers, it would be for one season. It'd be for one season. It'd be to try to, come back home, come back to the Bay, win a Super Bowl. I believe his parents still live in the Bay Area, like kind of like, coming home, final last hurrah. I think he already did that in Tampa Bay, though. And I think he is going to be retired. And I think he's going to stay retired. I think maybe the only or the best chance for him to come back would be if Trey Lance got injured in season and somehow they didn't have anybody and they were doing really well. And Tom Brady's like, I'll try to make a playoff run. And he comes back for like half a season. I think that'd be insane. Obviously, super unlikely as well, but I just don't really see it happening. I think Brady's going to stay retired, but it's always fun to talk about Tom Brady 49ers rumors. So that's kind of all I have, though. But anything else you want to add, Aiden?
No, no, I think that's super interesting. That'd be crazy if it happens. I think that's less likely to happen than, although I don't know, Brady coming in, I like his family is pretty rooted in where they are. I don't think they spend a whole lot of time out west. So it'd be like him going on a business trip for 9 months. And I don't know if he really wants to do that because he retired to be with family. Um, I think it's more likely that he takes a year off and then is like, I need to play football, and signs with somebody next year, primed to make a run. That probably won't be the Niners. I think Lance is going to have a very good year, and the Niners are going to be in the thick of the playoffs again. So I think if Brady to the Niners is ever going to happen, it'll happen like relatively soon, because I think that he wants that full off season, to kind of digest something completely new. And I don't know how much Kyle would compromise the way that Bruce Arians did to integrate a lot of what Brady did previously. But I mean, he turned Matt Ryan into an MVP candidate. I think Brady now is more mobile than Matt Ryan was then. So I think it would work. Um, it's just so many things need to happen. I think I mentioned it before, 2% chance, but would be crazy television and would be a crazy story.
It would be pretty insane. And I think I'm right there with you. I think it's very, very unlikely. I think Tom Brady is retired. I think he's going to stay retired. It'd be pretty weird if he goes to a third team. I just don't see that happening. And especially like the way, okay, I think some people think like, he went out, he lost. He went out and he almost came back down 27-3 this time. Like he almost did it again. So I think like he had a great run, almost won the MVP last year, won the Super Bowl for the year before that. I think he's good. I think he's done. And I think, like you said, the most likely chance for him to come back would be in a year after, like you said, like he's just like, I can't do this. I need to go play again. Which is weird though, because he's like, 46 then? Crazy stuff. But I think that's going to do it for today's episode. If you guys listen to the full podcast on the podcast format, that's awesome. If you listen to the full episode on YouTube, awesome as well. If you're just listening to this segment, we are going to be doing podcast segments every Sunday, recording every Sunday and recording every Wednesday. These are probably going to come out either Sunday or Monday and then Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when we record. But the full episodes are available as a Nuggets of Gold podcast or on the To The Crib YouTube channel. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back on Wednesday talking 49ers football. And if you also want to get some NFL content, that will be posted on the YouTube channel as well. So thank you all for listening so much, and we'll be back on Wednesday.